Namaste. Welcome to Satsang. So, Satsang is for the direct realization of truth, the direct experience of truth. So everything I say is applying to you, and every question that's asked is applying to you, and every answer that's given is for you. Because there is only one being, there is only the one being. Most human beings believe that there are 7.5 billion human beings on this planet. And countless other species, you know, infinite variety, diversity. But the truth is there's only one being, and it's appearing in all these shapes. It's appearing as all these species. It's having fun, showing up as sentient and insentient life. Being everything from empty space to a human being to a black hole and everything in between. So if there is only one of us, why do most of us feel convinced that we are one in billions of human beings? Why is that so convincing? Why is that so hypnotic? So that really not many people on the planet ever question that, do they really? Ever? And it's really because everything's fine until we start thinking, you know? Have you noticed how thinking starts to cloud everything? And this one infinite being that really is the only thing that exists is on this kind of journey, if you will, to be self-aware through the forms it takes. You know, it's pure awareness, infinite awareness. And then when it plays with these shapes, becoming these things, these forms, it wants to become more aware of itself. So, and even an amoeba is aware on, you know, a certain level of its surroundings, its environment. And a cat is aware of what it is to be a cat. And a human being, you know, when it becomes a human being, things are a little different there, because a human being can, for the first time in any of the shapes it's taken, at least on this planet, begin to question where it came from. Like, I have a human body, but I'm not just a human being. Where did I actually come from? And so for a long time, it's on this mission, this infinite being, to find out what it is. The first thing it sees is this human body. So it says, this is what I am. And it seems reasonable, seems logical, doesn't it, to assume that first thing it sees when it asks that question, it is what it is. And for a very long time after that, it doesn't question that. It doesn't question until this assumption that I am this body only and this mind becomes so painful. Usually when the life that's going on is not going our way, or when the existence of that body is threatened, or something happens, usually. It begins to question. And in human beings, it can recognize finally the contrast between seeming to be just somewhere in time and space, having a human existence. And its true form, which is everywhere, all the time, everything, appearing as everything. And so, through the contrast of having a body, it can come to see that it's not this body. And through the contrast of moving and changing and growing in the physical body, in the mind, it can come to recognize that it's none of those things, that it doesn't even need a body. And that's what Satsang is for. Satsang is for the end of this journey, to become self-aware, to become really self-aware of what our self actually is. What is that self? And if you're listening to this, then you're coming to the end of that point. You've already become disenchanted with being a separate being, and all the ups and downs and the highs and lows and the this and thatness of it. And it's time, through having had the contrast of a mind, exploring the world through the mind, to find out what is before the mind, what is beyond the mind. To do that, we have to turn around the way that we perceive things. All human beings begin to judge their environment and assume that there are all these different beings based on how things look and how things appear to be. But in Satsang, we're coming to see what the essence of everything is, and it is the same formlessness, infinite awareness that is the essence. When we look at the essence of everything, then we'll easily see the oneness. If we judge only with our senses and what our mind says about what our senses are experiencing, we'll be certain that if there's all these infinite different forms and beings. If we just took a surface look at everything out here, it would be easy to believe, well, you look different to me, you look different, and so do you. And how can we possibly all be the same? You know, this table looks different to this chair. Everything in this room looks different. And everything you're going to see for the rest of your life looks different. Every human being is going to appear different to anyone that's come before. And if we approach our satsang in the way that we approach everything else, using our mind, using our senses only, we're going to find it extremely hard to see the one that is all of this. But if we become more interested in the essence of what we really are, through a question like, what am I actually? Then we begin to move beyond just mind's interpretation. There's nothing wrong with our mind, but it can't grasp something that isn't different. It's always looking for difference, isn't it, to compare. This one's bigger, this one's small, this one's fatter, this one's thinner, this one's richer, this one's poorer. This is better, this is worse, this is good, this is bad, this is wanted, not wanted. It works constantly by comparing. So even while you have your senses still in your body and your mind, you can begin to inquire what is beyond the surface appearance of all this, what is underneath it, what is inside it. And it's nothing tangible at all inside all of us, inside everything, inside the atoms on this table. Inside everything is this empty, formless awareness, pure sentience itself. It's a little weird to think that the same intelligence that makes a human being intelligent is also being that table, isn't it? Because we like to fit into categories of sentient and insentient. And you'll never quite look at a table the same again when you really get this, because it isn't really a table. So it's a learning in satsang, or an unlearning, if you will, of how we've used to perceive everything, how we're used to coming at our whole world, and we apply the same thing to our spirituality, we're going to struggle. But if we can look past what everything looks like and stop judging based on appearance, I'm not talking like the superficial judgment of, you know, does my bum look big in this? I'm talking about, you know, male, female bodies are obviously different because they look different, you know. I'm not going any further with that one. I'm digging myself a hole, aren't I? Just because every form looks different doesn't mean it actually is. It doesn't mean there's anything different at all. And when you look at what it's made from, just as steam and water, liquid water and ice appear to be very different depending on what you do with the temperature and the energy between those molecules. But it's still all water, it's still all the same substance. And yet it looks and appears to be extremely different. You can burn your hand on steam, and you can sit on a block of ice. Yet it's all water. So satsang is really an unlearning and a really learning not to only trust your senses, not to only trust your mind. That if we leave some room for some deeper seeing that doesn't come from your eyes, doesn't come from your senses, it's a kind of non-phenomenal seeing of that which is not a phenomenon. Then the one can reveal itself to you. What you really are can reveal itself fairly quickly. What takes us all the time in satsang is to really come to value perceiving from this other way. We all start our satsang trying to think about what we are, and all that does really is generate more thoughts. And none of us come into this journey knowing how to perceive this other way, how to look inside our being. You know, all we really know is our thoughts and our body and our world and our relationships and all of that. So that's why we're here, to practice this seeing that comes from a question. And really, ultimately, to learn to value that seeing much more than there seems to be-ness of all these different things that we see when our senses are functioning. We don't have to get rid of our senses, we don't have to stop using them, but really just to come to know actually what you are looking at fully, either with your inner seeing or your outer eyes. And then you can play in all this seeming difference and not get caught ever again. Not be able to believe you've lost something when a body disappears, or you've gained something when a body comes. So I don't want to talk for too long. We'll start with a question that was emailed in. I have a question for satsang. I've been reminding myself throughout the day to tune into the noumenon, which is, if you haven't heard that term before, it's just really another word for infinite awareness, the silence. So I've been reminding myself throughout the day to tune into the noumenon and asking, is silence here when in certain situations? And when I first did this, it felt quite overwhelming. However, the silence has felt less present when I've done this more recently. Is this normal, or is it a sign that I'm not doing it right? It's a really common question. That's a really good question as well, because it's something that everyone, I think, goes through at some point. The first thing to realize really is that the silence is always here. It's not fluctuating when we first hear that silence, or feel that stillness, whatever we want to call it, awareness, silence, noumenon, me. So if it seems that it's fluctuating, it seems as if it's getting stronger or weaker in our experience, louder or quieter, then it's really our attention that's moving. And really what happens is we first notice that silence. We want to give all of our time and attention to it because it's so beautiful, it's so lovely, it's so peaceful. And in resting, just being that silence, listening to that silence, what happens then is some of these thought patterns and emotions that we've been suppressing begin to come to the surface. And so when we are used to this silence being very strong and our attention then begins to move back to some of these thoughts that are coming up, these patterns, then we might feel as if the silence has got quieter, not as strong. But really what it is we're putting some necessary attention on this thought pattern that's come up. Something has popped up for us to look at. Something has arisen for us to acknowledge and be aware of and to begin to unravel. And so in my experience, it really was like that. The silence would seem to get even louder, very almost audible. And then when something would come up, something would rise up to be seen and to be released, whether it be your thoughts or emotions, or something would happen, the silence would seem to diminish while I worked through that pattern. Never left, but it seemed to be quieter sometimes. And so then when you work through that and release that, the silence seemed to come back much louder than it ever had. Hopefully you know what I mean by the silence being loud. You know, if you've ever gone past the fire engine, or a fire engine's gone past you or something with its sirens blazing, and it's so loud you can hardly hear, after it's gone, there's this stunningly present silence in the background that's noticeable in contrast with that noise. So it is normal, and it is a sign that you are doing it right, because in that silence, you're allowing, in that stillness, you're allowing what needs to be seen to come up. And for myself, it was like waves going up the beach. The silence would get really, really loud, and then it would tend to recede a little bit as something came up to be looked at and let go of. And then when it came back, it came even further each time it would go. And so I hope that answers your question. It sounds like you're very much doing it right. As long as it's not ever actually seeming to go, that's the main thing, completely. That's the thing to watch. Lovely. Very good question. Anyone else like to ask? Oh. It's going to fall from back there. Take it off if you don't want.
Life's been pretty amazing, and lots of peace, joy, love, and let's see what the day brings type attitude going on. And I know when there's no suffering, it's easy for things to slip in. You don't notice them because they're not bothering you. And I recognised the other day that there was, when I was driving, that there was a sense of I'm driving. But it wasn't about that. It was about and listening to you there about not using your senses and trying to get to the point.
Something.
There's a real sense of awareness and being and peace, but sometimes there seems to be here looking on it. And you said in Satsang, might have been here last week over lunchtime, when you said to someone, they said, you won't be looking out of my eyes. And you went, yes I can, or something like that. And there's always a sense of here looking out or hearing, or not always, but there's sometimes still that sense of here. So you asked me to ask the question, along with what am I, what is here. I've been doing it, it's been a couple of days now, I've been doing it, and I'm not expecting an answer when I'm doing it, but I was just kind of getting my first answer when I was listening to you then. I can't explain it though. Words don't fit it. But it was really, my question to you is more confirmation about the what is here feeling, you know, I can look around and see. And
Because just to clarify, we were asking what is here, like not what is here, but what is that here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the one thing that we all have is that sense that I am here.
Yeah.
And through that process, the sense that you have that I am here has begun to expand.
Yeah.
More and more to the sense of being everywhere. In certain situations, as you were saying, it's still a sense I am here, only here. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And will that ever go then? Will you know, you saying that what makes the table different to the chair? Well, I'm looking at that from here, and I'm not looking at it through your eyes. It's kind of here.
Yeah.
So
it more and more you'll have the sense that you don't know where you're looking from.
Yeah.
Which sounds a bit weird because we're all used to perceiving our world based on this assumption that I am here and everything else is outside.
Yes.
Separate.
Yes.
Everyone else and everything else. And even everything inside is kind of just going on inside, like thoughts and emotions and all of that, you know. So as that sense begins to go, that certainty that I am only here, then there's more and more of a sense of I don't really know where I am, which sounds terrifying to mind if you're listening through the mind. God, that sounds awful.
It feels like a relief to hear that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all the while the body just carries on. It'll do its driving, it'll do everything it needs to, it will talk as if it's a separate person all by itself.
Yeah.
It will do the exact same things. The only difference being that you're not so sure that you're only in it, or in it only, you know.
Yes.
There's a real sense before I'm here in this body, and that's about as far as I stretch, you know. As big as this body, as tall, and as, you know, even if we believe we're a being inside a body rather than just a body, there's usually a sense of a limited being that's dependent on the body. So as that begins to go, there's more of a sense of freedom, that you just not anywhere in particular, you know. And that you could say it's not being anywhere in particular or being everywhere all at the same time. And it's not up here.
Yeah.
It's more of just a recognition that what I am can't be limited to any particular location.
Yeah, because when I asked the question, I haven't had a lot of mind answers.
No.
You know, it's been really quiet. But there hasn't, there's kind of been the same experience as what am I? Because obviously it's really the same answer.
Yeah.
But I wasn't, it's only now listening to you a minute ago and listening to you now, recognising that that sense of peace, that answer, I wasn't recognising that as the answer. I was waiting for something else, I think.
We're not used to valuing not knowing as an answer, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So at first we start off with the sense, the real conviction, I am only here. And then from here we have the, we start to see what we are. We have the real conviction that I am everywhere.
Yeah.
But it's still happening here.
Yeah, exactly.
So the next stage then is that drops away and you just don't know where you are.
Oh, sorry then.
Which is strange when it happens, but it is the natural state. So what that means is the real bonus of this is when mind talks to you, if you're sure you're here, you have to listen to it. You have to.
Yeah.
If I'm only here, then everything this head says is saying to me.
And that
captive audience.
Exactly. Well, this came up when I was driving, and I felt I had to be there for a certain time, and done a lot of driving this week, and so I'm every time I'm driving, I'm asking, "Am I here?" And what is here?
Yeah.
And yeah, that answers it.
So here moves from, to answer the question, what is here? Experientially, it moves from a sense of being limited just to one location to less and less being. As it diminishes that sense, it'll flash into I am everywhere, knowing I am everywhere.
Yeah.
And then even that will be let go of.
Yeah.
To I just don't really have a clue, nor do I care.
Yeah. It's
if you don't know.
Sorry, it's the flashing of that
yeah.
I'm getting. Yeah.
It's even I'm everywhere as a definition that we're holding on to here.
Yeah,
isn't
exactly.
it?
Exactly.
In a location.
It's all been from here. It's like that's here in the body.
Nothing's really changed in the end, whether I think I'm just here or I think I'm everywhere. I'm still thinking I'm thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah. I was going to say I'm
clear as
not
mud.
Crackers then, but it's fine if I am. Thank you.
Good question. Anyone else like to ask? How do you follow that one?
I'm not sure, I'll try my best. It's not a competition. When we were talking at your house the other day, you were talking about formlessness, and you did some sort of, you were saying when there's nothing there, it's formless. So if I move and put an ashtray down there or whatever it was, as the formlessness moved, I don't know how exactly you put it, but
as it displaced the form. I put this cup down on the table.
Yeah.
There was nothing there, and then I put a cup in that space.
That's right.
As it displaced the formlessness, as it pushed aside.
Yeah, and I've often thought, well, yeah. So
that's where we all assume we all treat the formlessness like it's tangible.
Somehow, yeah. And I saw it for a glimpse around this. It's something I'm looking at, sense, and can you explain that to me first? Why doesn't it displace it?
Yeah. Because it doesn't.
Next question.
Yeah, next. No. It's. I think we touched on it the other day that even when we see that we're intangible and formless, we still, for a long time, treat that with a subtle tangibility. Yeah. So we still tend to think, like if you walk into a room, you notice all the objects in the room. You don't notice the space in the room because the space is less valued, less important, because it's not really useful, is it? It's just space, Things in the room seem to have much more value at first. And it's the same with our awakening. We value our body and our mind and our phenomenality. All the bits of us that are moving and changing and growing and jumping around for attention, our emotions and everything. And then we come to recognize that formless, intangible aspect of ourselves. But we automatically snap back to valuing phenomenality again, objectivity, somethingness. what we do then is we stamp that on the formlessness. We treat it like it's something. So we believe that if I put an object in, if there's empty space and I put an object in that space, then there is less space now than there was. Right? That's the common assumption that everyone believes until they don't. Really, there's the same amount of space, but there's less empty space. One more time, different way.
Scrambled it, is that
Yeah.
one? Yeah.
The space in this room that we're sitting in would be exactly the same amount if we took everything out of this room. Everything. It'd be the same amount of
Yeah, I get
space.
that. So on level, I get that. I've heard that before so many times. I'm
But we
seeing
all-
this somehow differently.
Sometimes, you know, we use these common phrases like, I'm going to declutter this room so that there's more space.
Yeah.
It's not true, is it? There'll be more empty space if we move some objects out. Something, to get around to answering your question in a long way, something that isn't tangible at all cannot be moved at all. You can't shove it, you can't pick it up, you can't carry it, you can't slice it and move it.
Right.
It'd be like trying to slice a section out of the sky and move it somewhere else. It's just not very possible, is it?
This is amazing. If I put that chair in the middle of it, that's taking up some of that space. That is,
It's taking up
that's
some of the
tangible space, that's what you're saying.
space is more tangible than what you are. Formlessness is even less tangible. But if we can look at it another way, if it's still not dropping in, if you wanted to give me don't do it. If you wanted to give me a shove, you could do, right? Because this body, at least, because it's tangible, there'd be something to push against.
Yeah.
Could you do that with the formlessness?
No.
So you seem pretty convinced there. So when I put a cup down inside the formlessness on the table, is it going to shove the formlessness out of the way? Don't worry, I've got about another 10 ways if this doesn't work. How long have we got?
Still the rim, isn't it? The rim of the cup, which must have taken up some space.
What if the cup isn't really there?
There we go, we're getting into it now. So,
What if the cup is the formlessness?
I can think that way. I can sort of see it
The
that way, but it's not bad seeing it.
question, does the cup move the formlessness? That whole question depends on the fact, on the assumption rather, that the cup is different to the formlessness.
See if I've got it right. Is it the same formlessness but condensed? Would that be right?
It's vibrating at a different. When it appears as empty space, it's vibrating at a very high frequency,
Okay.
which we call invisible,
Right.
right? Because you can see straight through it.
Yeah.
And then when it starts to slow down in vibration, we start to call it different colors, and you have the whole spectrum of
Right, yeah.
color, natural light. And then when it slows down even more, we get to, that's what we call solid things, tangible things.
But they're just vibrating at a much denser.
And could you tell it was a cup if you didn't have your senses and your body?
No.
You just seem almost upset to admit that. Yes, you do, and you don't have to get rid of that. I'm just going to go around the other way. All of your evidence that for being able to tell me that there is a cup there is because you're using your senses and your mind to remember the label cup. This is what cup looks like. But if you don't use your senses or your mind temporarily, are you so sure there's a cup?
That's when I saw it, yeah, a glimpse, didn't you? I
Yeah.
saw it just for a second.
Yeah.
Because we do what? Well, what did you say?
Also, the other thing to cement this in is to recognize that the formlessness, if it's present, it must be simultaneously everywhere all the time, because it cannot be divided. You can't slice something that has no tangibility into. You can't take a section of it out where it's absent or missing. Can't think about this with your mind too much, because mind says if it's formless, it's absent, it doesn't exist.
That's how I'm thinking, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a, gosh.
But it's really quite the opposite. If the formlessness is present everywhere, then everything that seems to be appearing in it must be it, no matter what it looks like, especially that cup. Then can you move something that is present? You know, if I put the cup down, does the formlessness get displaced? Can that happen when it's everywhere all the time? Where would it move to?
That's the bit. That's a bit upsetting.
Where would it move to that it isn't already?
Squeeze up.
So more formlessness over this side and less over there, yeah. So I know we're having a laugh here, but hopefully we're breaking down these ideas we still have about formlessness that stop us from really perceiving what the ultimate reality is.
Because as we come away from that, you know, we talked about when you start using words like consciousness, awareness, and renewing on that moment, I tend to objectify those words.
Yeah.
And I know at first I sort of know what they're aiming at or pointing at, but then I have this sort of idea of what formlessness is, and mine usually have boundaries, although I can't see them. But somehow they must have a boundary. And for the first time I saw that, I'd noticed it before, but I didn't know what you could do about it. I thought that's how it is till it's not. And then I sort of saw that, and then coming home, I sort of, although I'm objectifying that now, but I realised nothingness, so just did it.
Yeah.
There's nothing here. So what are you worried about here? There's nobody there.
And emptiness as well really appealed to me at a certain point. It's just completely empty of any form at all.
But the whole thing is, it's all empty.
Empty. Everything that seems to be full is empty.
It's the emptiness.
And everything that seems to be empty is actually full.
That's what they're meaning to when they say that. And
if you can see,
I do see it. I do see it a lot. I mean, I'm walking on Tesco's or Hicko, it's just a blur to me. You know, people are there. I don't interact. Except I might get caught in a little bit.
Yeah.
Some might give me a funny look, and whatever, you know. But generally, I can do it. But my head keeps thinking it. It would start working it out, and I know I can't work it out. But it just irritates me. I'll get a resentment. And I've got, resentful, there's nobody here. And that can take it away, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nobody get resentful at. So I'm halfway there. You know,
most of the way there.
Most of the way there.
It's absolutely alien to us at first to turn it round on its head that something that is completely insubstantial is the only thing that's real, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the other side of that coin is everything that I thought was real and tangible is actually unreal. It's coming and going. It's like a mirage in the road. You're driving along, there's a mirage of water. And from a certain distance, it looks really like water, doesn't it? It looks like something. But then because you get close to it, it's not really there, you know, and you can't get wet from it.
It's not saying with you, of course, I get to you more really because you don't manage when I get close to you.
All of that depends on you having a body as well, doesn't it?
Go on.
Senses interacting with senses.
Yeah. Is that what's happening now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Even if you touched my leg and said, but you're real and solid, you'd be using your sense of touch. Yeah. I set myself up for that one, didn't I? You'd be relying on your sense of touch in this body that's not going to last. That actually is the formless awareness anyway, to tell me that some part of me is tangible. Tangible and solid is only applicable when you've got a tangible, solid body to make that assumption from. And if we don't use our senses or our mind just for a moment,
You get a glimpse of it. You see
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
What is here then? Oh, just me, you know.
It isn't even me, is it? Yeah.
Well, just it, just the
Whatever it-
lumen,
yeah,
whatever you want
whatever
to
it is,
call
yeah.
it, yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah. So it must be then, you know, if you ask the question, what am I? And you come to that formless space of awareness, you open your eyes, does it suddenly vanish because there's suddenly all these
Not at
objects
all,
here?
no. I rarely meditate now, yeah, I'm sure it's always open.
Yeah.
It's just
And as you see deeper and deeper that I've still been given some tangibility to the formlessness.
I'm still giving it, yeah, but I don't know how not to.
Just to know that you're doing that. So what is, you know, then what is really intangible?
Right.
What does it actually mean?
And that's what I got to nothingness, and that helps me more.
Exactly. So there's a breakthrough. And then from that, staying as that place, that formlessness, will start to come revelations and epiphanies. But formlessness has to be everywhere, all the time. You know, it can't be somewhere like an object. You know, it can't be over there or just over here. You know, and all these things will become more and more clear. Once you're willing to let go, yeah, once you're willing to let go of treating the formlessness like it's something, albeit very subtly, we don't realize we're doing that. These epiphanies will happen very, very fast. They'll come quicker and quicker and
Sorry,
easier.
and then we were talking about the formless is inside that Buddha. It is the Buddha. I saw the form. And it's gone again. So you start thinking about it, you're Buddha, right?
And the Buddha field, Buddha nature is that which is everywhere all the time. But it can appear to look like all of this. It looks like infinite forms.
Yeah, but I've heard that many, many times, and now I'm beginning to see it. That's what.
And you start to see all this is just seems to be a kind of optical illusion.
Yeah.
It doesn't disappear on the seeing, but you know what it is you're actually looking at. Therefore, you're not responding inwardly and getting these things.
That's the difference, yeah.
Because you know what it is. If it's nothingness, there's nothing to respond to.
I'm exactly the same. Right?
Doesn't mean you just become an automaton or something, but you don't have the fear and the anger and all of that stuff that human beings are struggling with, you know, because if I think I'm really looking at another person, then I'm going to be responding inside as if, you know, based on my memories of this other person, my previous experiences and my expectations and all of that stuff. If I know that you're not really that and that you're the formlessness looking like Steve, appearing to be, then we can actually have a decent conversation about nothing.
About nothing. Yeah.
Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Just to be willing to see it. And there's nothing you can do now at this place
to
force that realization.
It
will come so very quickly when you, now that you've seen what you were still doing, you know, the assumption.
Yeah.
It will happen very quickly.
Okay.
And then you can just carry on having fun with all this.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Can I just go away?
Would anyone else like to ask a question?
I think Steve's actually just given me something then. So I've had like a really interesting week, but just on that. So basically, if it was a TV screen, all the pixels on the screen get illuminated as they go across to create images. So essentially, that's what you sort of say. So the space is all the same, and we just sort of rent it and move through it.
Rent it.
Or lease it, or take it up for a moment and then move through it. Is that sort of like when you talk about formlessness?
Well, you are that space.
Mm-hmm.
You are that space that you're renting.
Yeah.
And the one renting it, if I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
It seems to be that we're moving around in time and space.
Yes.
But not really.
So we're sort of projections into that time and space.
Yeah, you spin out your own projection. Imagine yourself to be a human being, and all that entails, and having relationships and everything, and a life, you know, and then we come to believe that projection and forget the one that's watching for a while. And then that becomes clearer that actually, but I'm watching all of this that's going on this screen of consciousness. And then you can then have a chance of recognizing what is watching.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to call that.
Okay. So our consciousness is here. We're just using a different. It's an illusion that we're moving through, and we're creating these images. Well, the Numenon's creating these images.
It's just constantly creating shapes. That's what it does. It loves to do that, and it's always kind of. Well, I think I said before that it's always trying to become more and more self-aware in the shapes that it takes. It's completely aware as the Numenon, as the self-awareness. But then in the shapes it takes, it's trying to become more aware, self-aware, and then ultimately self with a capital S, aware. You know, so it's using that reflection. It's using what it sees on the screen to contrast back against that which isn't moving and changing. Clear as mud.
Boom. No, it is. Yeah. It's just like when you said about the cup, when you said to Steve about the cup not moving the space away, but actually just taking up that space for the moment and then moving away. So it doesn't.
Not really even taking up that
space. Just passes through it.
Is it?
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. It's
like a projection on a.
It's actually much easier to realize the cup isn't there than to try and explain how some object doesn't displace the formlessness. Because
it's not really there. We just
if there was an object, we'd be in trouble. You know, but if it isn't there, there's nothing actually occurred. It's always going to look like a cup.
No,
but you know what you're looking at in the end.
Yeah. Okay. And also just I've had sort of a kind of a strange day with somebody who's projected a lot of hate on me, and it's a very difficult thing. And I dealt, you know, I reverted back to the silence really, and I was able to manage it. But I think you sort of spoke briefly about whatever that intensity of emotion is. It doesn't matter. It's kind of the same emotion, whether it be love or hate or pride or arrogance or whatever. Whatever intensity is, it's the same. It's basically the same thing, dressed in different clothes.
Yeah, the self can show up as hate or love or fear or guilt or a planet or a human being, or you know. And if we use our mind, one of those emotions feels much better and one of them feels much worse. But that's the only reason is because we think that they're actually different. If you come to see even the emotions of the formlessness appearing that way, then it can't actually be, love can't actually be different than hate. If you really believe in those labels, love and hate, of course we're going to prefer one over the other. If we really believe they're different. But if they're just, if love is like the red on the rainbow and hate is like is it purple at the bottom? Blue? Whichever one.
Indigo.
Whichever one it is anyway, at the bottom. Then you can see they're not really different, they're just appearing. It's like a refraction through the light into it. You shine the light of consciousness through an object of form, it's going to get refracted based on the thinkingness in that form and how good it is or not at recognizing itself. If it doesn't recognize itself, it's going to appear as much lower, more negative emotions. And if it really believes it's separate, it's going to want to project that onto someone. You just happen to be the lucky person.
No, but it's true, because after this, I sort of got cannonballed with this particular burst of hate. I realized afterwards that it was almost the same as like getting a burst of love, almost.
Yeah.
It's the same in a strange kind of way. I did sort of, it like knocked the wind out of me a bit, but the residue or the repercussion of that was almost the same intensity in a kind of strange way.
And if you realize that they feel different because they're vibrating at different rates, but they only feel different because they're vibrating inside the body. You know, one feels pleasant, one feels unpleasant. based on how much we're resisting it. We resist what we call hate, so it feels bad. We don't resist what we call love, so it feels good. But they're not actually different. It's only the way we're treating them is different, and hence the wildly differing, seemingly, results of those two things. And then when you really get this, you don't have to be afraid of fear or anything, even terror, even awful panic. It's not really any different than peace, just vibrating at a different rate. And when you treat everything that way, it goes back into peace anyway. So there's a sense that this thing might come at you, but as the formless reality, it can just go straight through you. If you're a human being in that moment, a separate being, you've got no job, no alternative rather than to either take it personally or project it back or absorb it and believe it, or throw the same thing back again to defend yourself. But if there's a formless, if you just like space, it'll just pass straight through you and out the other side. Like, oh, there it goes. But it will be diminished.
Probably not the best reaction to do in that particular circumstance.
Yes, don't do that then.
No, because that didn't hurt. That was fine.
Yeah, next. But if you're a solid object, a seemingly solid object, it's gonna hit you like a tidal wave. But if you're formless in that moment, if you've seen yourself, it can pass straight through because you won't be able to resist it at all. And as it goes through your body, that energy field, it will be diminished, it will be warmed up a bit because you won't be resisting it like the person who's projected it is. You'll be able to transmute some of it, or maybe all of it, back to peace. Rather than having to send it back out with even more force. It's a different way to live, isn't it? Because we're all kind of wanting to avoid negative emotions, but eventually it becomes about transmuting them into higher frequencies, which immediately happens if you're not resisting it. It goes back, what was purple goes back to being red, just because you're not resisting it. It's the nature of everything to get higher in frequency, which obviously the higher in frequency is the more, like ecstasy, bliss, joy, those are the kind of highest frequencies a human body can feel. And peace, that little thing.
That.
Yeah. So it's good to experience something like that from where you are now and see how different it is compared to before. And to recognize that some beings will want to project stuff onto you because somehow they sense deep down that you're not going to attack them in return. They can offload, they can release, they can even though they don't know what the self is, and that you've realized something, they intuitively sense it because they are that self, that noumenon. They sense that there's non-resistance there, so they can offload. I'm not talking about somebody who's that's one of these energy vampires. I'm not talking like that. You don't be a doormat and absorb it all. Take on everyone's rubbish. It's not like that. Yeah, but it just passes straight through you because there's literally nobody there to be affected by it. So that might happen once. It's happened a few times, and it's an interesting experience. Not having to take it personally. It's very different. Fun times.
Yeah, hilarious. Thank you.
Anyone else like to share? Oh, yeah. Sorry, what? Yeah. Sorry. It's fine this end.
I think it's more of an observation, really, just spurred on by what Dave just said about, and then your answer about transmuting things that could be seen as negative by other people into peace, and not taking things personally. And I've done a lot of work on that myself recently.
And you're going to have a crash course in it.
And I'm going to have a crash course on it.
Or having.
And now I'm being thrust into a position where I have to practice it.
Yeah.
I have to practice it. So this week I've been bombarded with information for hours without any break every day. And my body's been tired and my mind's been tired, but I've loved it because my mind has got so full that it just can't do anymore.
Yeah.
So then there has to be peace. So that's good. But there have been a few little feelings of like uncomfortableness when I've not been in the now. So then I've recognised, oh, I'm not in the now. Okay, that's fine. Let it go. Do whatever it needs to do.
Yeah.
And then that's brought it back to stillness again. And again, it's getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Is this length of time that it's feeling like that. But I'm recognising that I'm going to be in a position where people are offloading, and there's going to be a lot of very raw stuff. And recognising that if I don't resist it, I can transmute some of that into peace and reflect it back into peace.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. Even before it comes to you, you'll be affecting those people.
Yeah.
You'll be affected even before they begin to feel any emotion in a very traumatic situation for those people. You will be, as your energy field, as your recognition deepens, your energy field is much higher and much vaster. And because, most importantly, it's not asking anything of that person at all. Don't need anything or want anything from them. Not trying to change or control them. It'll be immediately their experience, their suffering will be diminished to some degree at least. They go through the same thing as they would if you weren't there, but they won't quite feel so bad. And then if it does get projected, it's most human beings, if they express emotion, negative emotion, attack someone, which we can't help but do if we believe we're a separate person. I'm trying to get something from you, trying to get you to admit I'm right or something like that's going on underneath, then you're immediately going to have to feel to put up a defense and send back this counterattack. And this is what most people are doing all the time. But if I send this stuff at you and it goes straight through you and nothing comes back, then do you remember that oh, never mind, that's a really bad analogy. Otherwise you're just bouncing its energy back between two. I'll just say it now anyway. When I was a kid, I had one of those ZX81 Spectrum
like
thing.
Pong.
Yeah. And you know the game with the bricks?
Yes.
And it bounces.
Yes.
And you have to knock the bricks off the wall.
Yes.
At a certain point, if you get it in, it just goes bing, 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 bing. And the energy comes like that between two beings that are projecting from the ego.
Yeah.
I notice it as well because where I live, the houses are kind of opposite each other and the sound bounces back and it's much louder than it is. And we're doing this with energy all the time.
Yeah.
If there's nobody there for it to bounce back off, i.e. you've seen yourself to be the silence or the peace to whatever degree, it's going to go straight through and dissipate. And that person can then not have to, intuitively they'll know that something's been released and that it's safe to just feel whatever they're feeling.
Yeah.
And, you know, it'd be a very different experience. No, they won't be conscious of this process at all. The more awake you get, the more really is about transmuting your own stuff, and then you'll start to encounter people that have stuff that they could do some help with.
Yeah.
Use some help with. Not as a doormat, like we were saying.
No.
Not like, let me help you. Let me take this, because we know how that feels and it's draining, it's exhausting. But there's no difference in the end between processing the emotions in this body or that body, because it's all you, isn't it? So, and it's really just a linear concept that you have to feel your emotions in your body. I have to feel mine in mine. So as you really get this, that there isn't any boundaries, you can have a very profound effect without being drained at all. In fact, you probably might start to enjoy it and feel uplifted by it. Because everything that comes at you turn into peace. It's the old legend of alchemy, turning a base metal into gold. The base metal being the fear of the base chakra, the root chakra, and the gold being the opening of the crown chakra, peace. This is what it's really trying to describe, alchemy. Anyway, never mind my rambling.
Okay. It's just interesting because there was a situation that I was in where the things that were the energy in the room and the discussion was really what other people might perceive as challenging information that was being processed, and I just didn't feel any resistance to it. I wasn't upset by it or anything like that. It was just all flowing through, and seeing where it went. And I think that's surprising.
Because you know, if we've all dealt with very heavy negative emotions like grief or shame or guilt, you know, especially grief, what you'll be experiencing in your new job. And we've all assumed that they're very disempowering, very draining emotions, and we don't want to feel them. But as we were saying before, it's not really the grief, it's how much we're resisting it and fearing it. So even grief can be felt in this state of peace, which you put people in that position of maybe being able to do that, peace and grief at the same time, you know, rather than, who knows, it might be the difference between somebody passing without fear or, you know, or not. Who knows? But as you wake up more, you'll have more of a profound effect on everyone. And you'll actually, the real joy of having a body once you've woken up is to be able to do stuff like this, to be able to help someone, and they won't ever know that you've done it.
No.
They'll just walk away, that she was really nice, you know. I feel a lot better now, you know, something like that.
It feels strange to be excited is not the right word. To want to do it.
Yeah, in a job that most people would run a mile from.
Yeah. It just feels a bit weird.
But it's evidence of how far you've come, really. That there's nothing really to be afraid of, especially these emotions and subject of death that people usually tend to avoid. That it, you know, you're big enough in your consciousness to absorb anything and to not panic when anything occurs like that. I think you'll find it a really fulfilling experience. Most important. Role.
It's that first. I mean, like, I've had a first today. I've had a first discussion, and there'll never be the first real experience. And I just see that all for what it is. Now, you know what I mean by that. Okay.
Good. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Okay. Would anyone else like to ask or to share? Okay, then we'll leave it there. Yeah.
So,
You're almost
yeah. Just something you said to me a few days ago. You were talking about when you're checking into the new one silence. You said, if I got this wrong, apologies, that if you check in from not being a person, from the
As the conscious.
as the being here, just being here, or just being the space.
Mm-hmm.
You are from when getting that gravitational pull going, or getting away from what you think your identity is at the moment.
Yeah.
And then you said, if you just check in from a person, you're actually confirming that you are two separate.
There's a me tuning into the silence. There's a me recognizing the awareness. There's a me resting in the stillness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's actually confirming that you're a person still.
Yeah.
So you're actually kind of going down from a gravitational kind of.
It's a fine line, because as you start off in the assumption that you're a human being and there is no silence, or no greater self, So to begin to recognize that silence and listen to that silence is a step up, away from the gravitational pull of the mind. Up to a certain point, then
Right. Okay.
then our sneaky little ego goes, right, I'll make myself a new identity, being a tuner inner.
Right.
Someone who is very good at recognizing the self.
Yeah.
And it happened the same for me, and all of a sudden I'd found this beautiful silence and peace, and I started suffering again. I'm like, what the heck is going on now? And I came to see that if I'm not confirming I am that silence, and the silence is listening to itself, or the stillness is recognizing itself, then I'm automatically agreeing with the assumption that I am a someone, because listening to that silence, because the well-grooved habit is to believe that, isn't it? And we all need that first step. I'm listening to the silence. We all need that first step. Well, there's a few lucky individuals that suddenly, whoa, there is only silence, end of story. And then they usually can't speak for a couple of years after that. Most of us have to do these intermediary stages, and it's very hard to say when that moves from being a useful thing to not being a useful thing. Usually you find out because you start suffering again, because it's time to upgrade your identity to the being the silence. Does that help?
Yes, because I've been trying. The silence of me still comes and goes to a certain extent. So you left me with a couple of questions. So every time, kind of, as much as I can, as soon as I notice the silence there, I'm asking the two questions. Definitely.
So what were the questions? Just for,
because
I think it'd be useful for everyone to hear.
Can you? Oh God, can you find the you that is checking in,
listening to the silence,
or tuning into the silence?
Yeah. So can I find a me actually in that silence?
That's right. That's right.
Because if I am a me, as someone listening to the silence, I should be able to find that me. Yep, the silence, I can hear it, and I can see this me. And hopefully you've completely failed to find a someone every time you've looked.
Yeah, I'm getting a bit like what Maggie said earlier about there's just that here, but there's nothing kind of solid.
No one in it.
Yes, it's just here.
So in that not finding a someone, you're undoing. It seems contradictory that the way to succeed is to not find what you're looking for. But if I don't find a me in that silence consistently, then it'll become clearer and clearer that it's only the silence. Every time I look, that must be what I am. Not begin to become a knowingness. Hopefully you're noticing that conviction that you are that is coming to the forefront. Otherwise, if we don't do this, we're automatically agreeing that I'm a someone. which usually feels quite limited again there, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll start to notice limitation in our experience again as it creeps back in, also known as suffering.
Yeah, because sometimes the silence has been there and then I've not, I just noticed it, and then I'm going, oh, I didn't check in that time, so I check in properly kind of thing.
Yeah, good. And how about your second question?
The second one was just asked, what am I?
Yeah.
This, or what am I really?
Extra confirmation.
Extra confirmation.
And what happens when you ask that now?
Usually I've just hit by silence. With the odd little, sometimes I have a little thought comes up to kind of say hello kind of thing, and then, but the more I kind of just ask the question, it's just silence.
So on the one hand, you're not finding a me, and then you're also finding silence when you ask what you are. You can't do that for very long before you become very sure that you are that silence, and that there never was a me that was tuning in. It's a necessary step into it, but like you say, after a while it starts to go south.
So really keep kind of doing the proper checking in, so to speak.
Yeah, you'll know when you can stop, because you won't seem to need to tune in anymore. It will just be always there. And the idea that the silence can go will seem ridiculous, because if you are that, you're still here. How can the silence go if you're still here? If you are that silence, of course it can't go, and it'll seem strange that we ever experienced it being absent or coming and going in the end. That's when you can stop. At least stop that bit of information, and we'll move on. That's good, really good.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Fantastic. Good stuff. Okay. Thank you very much. Namaste.